Okay, so we were discussing in the last class gene transfer in bacteria. So if you remember, we discussed cloning vectors, we discussed preparation of genomic DNA library, and once you have constructed the clone.
Yes, ma'am. But one question is that, like, how can we prepare a genome library? Like, for that we have to cut the DNA, like cut
Right,
the genome into thousands and thousands of different pieces. Oh, but
exactly.
how do we will separate all that? We learned that in electrophoresis part that like if we do that thing with restriction stages, and that separation will be a major problem. So
Correct,
in
correct.
this case, how can we do that?
Yes, you are very correct. We cannot separate it, but what you do is that you cut the genomic DNA with, for example, South3A1, which is like a 4 base pair cutter, right? So it is going to cut approximately after every 256 base pairs, correct? So what you do is you run it on a gel and then see the kind of digestion pattern. And what you do is you gel elute the entire smear. You cannot separate the bands, but you gel elute the entire region, the entire smear of bands, right? You remember I showed you one of the gels in southern blotting that it gives you a smear agarose gel image.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, that I
Huh.
remember.
Right, so then what we do is we just gel elute the entire smear and then we ligate this whole gel eluted smear with the vector and then you transform it and
Oh,
then
ma'am. But the case is that in each plasmid we must have only one DNA, only one gene, right? Only one
yes.
fragment of. So how will that be possible? Like when we are saying that we are creating a gene library, gene means we must have each and every fragment in at least one plasmid, and that we have in separated in different test tubes, right? I think so.
Right. No, so listen to me first. So what you do is that it's not gene library, it's genomic DNA library, right? So when we say genomic DNA, it doesn't separate between gene versus non-gene. You are just creating a random genomic DNA library where some of the fragments will be cutting internal to gene, some of them will be cutting outside the gene, some will be containing the non-genic region, intergenic region, right? So in such cases what you do is that you simply ligate. Let me show you how. So you simply ligate these large number of fragments with the vector. So for example, the vector of choice is PUC19, right? And then we discussed, now the class is aware of that with PUC19 you can do blue-white screening, right? Alpha
Yes, ma'am.
quantification is possible. So PUC19 digested with, for example, BAMH1.
Yes.
19 digested with BAMH1 can be ligated to genomic DNA digested with, and then the two will be ligated. Now what will happen is you will have in the ligation mixture a variety of ligation products which will contain different DNA fragments. Now when we will put it in the bacteria, so that is, so that is what we were trying to discuss. I thought I'll cover it today, transformation. So when you will do the transformation, which is the uptake of the DNA by the bacterial cells, then usually only one plasmid is taken up by the cell, and therefore each individual colony will have one plasmid. I cannot say that it is carrying one unique type of plasmid, because you can have 3 4 colonies containing same type of plasmid, and one colony can contain one type of plasmid. So what we do is that we create a large pool, a large number of colonies. So for example, these can be in the range of let's say 5,000 to 10,000 colonies, and then each of these colonies are likely to contain the genomic DNA fragments, right? So the idea is that we select the number of colonies by considering by applying little bit of maths. So there is a formula. If you are interested, I'll tell you, but this is part of the course, I think, genomics and proteomics, and also I guess 733. but maybe I can tell you later, so it will not be part of mol bio course. So here you actually, there is a formula which tells you that okay, if this is the genome size, then this is the number of colonies, which is like 5 times more or 10 times more of the total size, which should actually represent the entire genomic DNA. Is it making
Okay.
sense or not?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So these are some large scale experiments, right?
Right, these
It's
are
not
large
so
scale
small.
experiments.
Yes.
No, exactly. These are large scale experiments, one thing. And the second thing is key, when we prepare genomic DNA library, usually if you have a very good screening assay, then the method really works. So for example, when we talk about screening assays, these can be the fluorescence, green fluorescence protein. So whatever, whichever colony is harboring the gene for GFP will actually fluoresce, or for example the gene for protease, gene for alpha amylase. I mean all those which can be assayed on plates, they can be easily picked up. You can see a clearance zone, you can see fluorescence, you can see a change in color or something like this. But otherwise, if you do not have a screening assay for screening the colonies, then ultimately you end up screening large number of colonies. And for that, what we do is there is something like southern hybridization. This is called colony hybridization. So what you do is you pick the colony, spot it on the nitrocellulose membrane, lyse the colony while it is on the membrane, and perform hybridization with the probe. So then it is called colony hybridization. Okay. But you will be learning all of these in detail later.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
But I thought you got the idea overall.
Yes, ma'am. I got it.
Okay, so when we talk about gene transfer in bacteria, so the gene transfer methods are transformation, conjugation, and transduction. So transformation is the method of uptake of DNA, but this is like naked um, take of naked DNA is transformation. So that means here free DNA, right? So that means when I use the term this, it is not cell which is involved. It's uptake of naked DNA or free DNA which takes place in transformation. When we talk about conjugation, this is transfer of DNA from one cell to another cell. So this is from cell to cell. So in this case, cell to cell contact is required, right? When we
Yes,
talk
ma'am.
about transduction, this is the uptake of DNA which is mediated with the help of viruses which are called bacteriophages, right?
Yes, ma'am.
What happens in transformation and how was this discovered? So this dates back to the 1940s actually, when there was a scientist called Griffith who performed an experiment wherein he actually experimented with the strain of Staphylococcus pneumoniae. So are you aware of this experiment or no?
Ma'am, we have learned, but I think we have to we should revise it. I think.
Okay, okay. So in this case, so this experiment, although he performed with a Streptococcus pneumoniae, but in fact, the experiment is equally, I mean, people later on performed with Staphylococcus, people later on performed with other strains, and they got similar results. But the first experiment was performed with this S pneumoniae. So in this case, what he found was there are two types of colonies with this which this strain forms. So one colony is actually smooth in shape and the other colony is rough in shape. So the colony which is smooth in shape is smooth because it has a capsule outside the cell membrane. So because of this capsule, it is smooth. The other one is rough. So that is why these colonies are called S form, which forms smooth colonies, and R form, which forms rough colonies. So in the experiment by Griffith, what he did was he found that the S form, right, the S form which has the capsule which forms smooth colonies is the one which is pathogenic. So when he used heat killed S form, see the middle panel, when he used the heat killed S form, it is S form which is the pathogenic. He found that the mouse survived. When he used the live living R form, rough form, he found that the mouse survived and R form is anyways non-pathogenic. S form is pathogenic, but when he used heat killed S form, the mouse survived. On the other hand, when he used heat killed S form along with live R form, what he found was that the mouse died. So the experiment suggested that heat killed S form alone, when used, the mouse actually survived. But when it was combined with live R form, it died. So this result suggested that the DNA, right? So in fact, Griffith was not sure whether it is the DNA. So he used the term transforming principle. So he suggested that heat killed S form transformed live R form, and that is why the mouse died. Right. So later on, Avery, McCarthy, and MacLeod, they determined that the transforming principle was actually DNA. So in this case, the heat killed S form because the S form was killed, so the DNA was released, and this DNA was taken up by the live R form, and this live R form, which was otherwise non-pathogenic, became pathogenic, and then the mouse died. And now if you remember from this experiment, we also discussed the case of Bacillus anthracis. You remember I told you that the anthrax is caused by uh, Bacillus anthracis, and the pathogenic principle, the pathogenic component is in the plasmid. So if we cure the plasmid from Bacillus anthracis, then Bacillus anthracis will not be pathogenic. So that means many a times these pathogenic genes are present on plasmids and they can actually transform. So this is the case which we discussed when we discussed about plasmids, right? But this pathogenic principle can be DNA as well, right? So then the question is, what is the transforming principle? What is the transforming principle in Griffith's experiment, which when heat killed, which uh, when he used the heat killed S form, it actually transformed the live R form. So that is actually DNA. It can be a DNA fragment, or it can be a plasmid. Anything is possible. So now the question is, what is the fate of the DNA? So the fate of the DNA, since I have taught you people restriction modification systems, so the first fate of the DNA is it can be degraded, right? Because if the restriction modification machinery will work and if it is recognized as foreign DNA, then the foreign DNA will be attacked and it will be degraded, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The second possibility is if it is a plasmid, and if it is not recognized by the restriction modification system as foreign DNA, and if it is a plasmid, it will replicate, correct?
Yes, ma'am. It will be.
Replication works. Third possibility is that it can integrate chromosome. So in any of the last two cases, whether it replicates or whether it can integrate in the chromosome, you can have this fate possible, right? So now when we talk about, so Avery McCarthy found that the transforming principle is DNA, but then how this transformation is achieved and whether it's a natural or artificial process. So it was found that the transformation can be actually natural or it can be artificial. We talk about natural transformation, there are a few examples. For example, Haemophilus influenzae, Bacillus, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, they all are capable of taking up naked DNA. Bacillus is one of the most common strain. I mean, many species of Bacillus are naturally competent and they can take up DNA. Okay, so now I use the word competent. So when we talk about the term competent, competent of taking DNA, right? So these cells are called as competent cells. Competent cells are the cells which can take up the DNA. Not every cell class, not every cell is competent. When we talk about natural competence or when we talk about artificial competence, not every cell is capable of taking up the DNA. So I'll be telling you how we can prepare competent cells. And what is natural competence and how it is achieved? So when we talk about natural transformation, the strains are Bacillus, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, a number of actinobacteria. This is how the natural competence works. So what happens is that for this natural competence, let's start from point number one. So double-stranded DNA actually binds to the plasma membrane. There are enzymes which cut the DNA. There are other enzymes which break down one DNA strand, and then a protein binds the DNA, and then this DNA enters the bacterial cell, and then it gets integrated. So this is one possibility. But then how this double-stranded DNA binds to the membrane? What are the enzymes which cut the DNA? How this is taken up? So for this, let's see this figure. So this is the figure which shows a typical example of natural competence. So natural competence is shown by certain bacterial strains at certain stage of their life cycle. So that means these strains are naturally competent but not all the time. So these strains usually they show natural competence only and only at a certain stage of their life cycle, and this is usually at late log phase. That means late exponential phase. The reason is that at this particular stage the cell density is more, at the same time the cells are actively growing. So log phase is the phase when the cells are exponentially growing, correct? So in late
Yes,
log phase the cell density is more and the cells are healthy as well. So at this stage actually the cells are, they show natural competence for a small time duration, and at this stage actually certain competence factors are produced by certain cells, and these competence factors they activate certain receptors on some other cells, right? And these actually produce in turn proteins like autolysin, which actually activate two components. One is DNA binding protein and the other one is a nuclease. So this is what is natural competence. It is not exhibited all the time. So this
ma'am.
is here.
What is the work of nucleases there?
Nucleases, because so as I showed you in this figure, so if you let me go over this, so receptors on the cell wall are activated by competence factors, right? Competent specific proteins are expressed. Autolysin is one example, but the other examples are COMX, COMP, COMT, etc. Autolysin activates a DNA binding protein at a nucleus in the cell wall, right? So then now if I go back to this figure, so you see that the role of this nuclease is to cut the DNA, right? Nucleases, because first you require, you see this figure, DNA binding protein is required. So as a result of this DNA binding protein, the double-stranded DNA binds. Point number one.
Yes, ma'am. But I think these are a restriction, like restriction endonucleases, like they are cutting at a specific locations, not like normal nucleases which simply degrade the DNA.
Yes, yes, yes. No, they are not. I mean, when we talk about nucleases, they degrade the DNA, but then that degradation is also in a time dependent manner. Okay, so for example, so maybe I'll discuss this part when I'll be teaching you sequencing. So nucleases, it is not that you incubate with DNAs and it will immediately degrade it. So it is also in a time dependent manner. So here, these are different types of nucleases, and then, but not DNases definitely, but not the orthodox type 2 restriction enzymes. These are different nucleases. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Right, and finally, the DNA is taken up. Uh, and I think this figure shows that how the different fates of DNA and how it is taken up. So I hope natural competence is clear to the class. So then I think let us discuss. Yes, natural competence is clear or no?
Yes, ma'am. It's clear. It's clear.
So when we talk about artificial transformation, mediated by a number of methods. First is chemical, and in chemical method, the methods that are used are calcium chloride based method. People also use lithium chloride. People also use rubidium chloride, depending upon the type of sample, and then prepare naturally competent cells. The other method is called as electroporation. So we are going to discuss these methods. So when we talk about chemical method, this method was developed by Douglas Hanahan and later on modified by two scientists called Mandel and Higa, and they were the ones who first proposed that we can make competent cells and by treating it with different chemicals. So in this case, let's see how we prepare the chemically competent cells. So competent cells, as the word itself we discussed just now, are the cells which can take up the DNA. So now the question is how they can take up the DNA, how we can prepare them artificially competent. So for this, what we do is you start with a single colony. Start with a single colony on a Petri plate, right? Then what we do is inoculate a single colony in 5 ml LB medium and let it grow overnight. Then take 1% inoculum and transfer in 100 ml LB medium. Allow to grow for 3 to 4 hours. So the point is, when I say 3 to 4 hours, what I mean is that when the OD is approximately 0.4 to 0.5, that means the cell should be in mid-log phase. Why mid-log phase is selected? Mid-log phase is selected because in lag phase the cells are actually not healthy. They are taking up the media, they are preparing themselves for growth. Exponential phase is the phase, or log phase is the phase when the cells are actively growing. They are the most healthy. So we select the stage which is mid-log phase when almost all the cells are healthy. The reason is we could have selected early log phase, but the problem is when we select early log phase, because the population of cells is asynchronous. That means you will have cells at different stages. So therefore some cells will be still at log phase, whereas when we select cells at mid-log phase, it is likely that all the cells will be in their log phase. All the cells will be in their most healthy condition.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
The second point is that once you have this OD reached, you need to maintain ice cold conditions all the time. So this is important. So that means what we do is cool the culture in ice water mixture. So we do not use ice alone. Ice water mixture is even cooler, so ice water mixture is used. Then what we do is uh, centrifuge the cells at 4000 rpm for 10 minutes 4 degrees Celsius. So this is important. So here the RPM that is used is 4000. We do not use, if you remember, we discussed that we use 12,000 RPM. So
Yes,
we do
ma'am.
for plasmid isolation, but here you use 4000 RPM. Again, you do not want the cells to be sheared or disrupted in any manner. So therefore, in order to maintain the cells in their most healthy condition, we use 4000 RPM and 4 degrees Celsius because you need to maintain cooling conditions all the time. Okay. Now what we do is we discard the media and then wash the pellet with again ice cold solution of calcium chloride plus magnesium. So when we do washing, what we do is we actually resuspend the cells. So here again, you do not do very vigorous vortexing. You just mix gently, just swirl gently, and you will find that the pellet will dissolve. Again, what you do is centrifuge at 4000 rpm for 10 minutes at 4 degrees Celsius. Again, repeat washing with same CaCl2 and magnesium chloride. The only thing is that in this case, you keep decreasing the volume. So for example, in the first step, if it is 30 ml of LP, you wash with 30 ml of calcium chloride. In the next washing, you can wash with maybe 15 ml of calcium chloride. Again, do the centrifugation at RPM, right? Then finally after repeating these 2-3 times, finally what we do is we centrifuge and then finally we resuspend the pellet in glycerol. So why glycerol is used? Glycerol is used because glycerol will prevent the damage to the cells. So what you do is the pellet is dissolved in glycerol. 10 to 15% glycerol is used and dissolved in minus 80. So the point is we preserve it at minus 80. So if we do not add glycerol, then what can happen is, because the cells are preserved at minus 80, they will get damaged by repeated freezing and thawing. Because when you would want to add the DNA, you will have to thaw the cells, because otherwise the cells would be in frozen condition. So during this thawing, the frozen cells can get ruptured. So when we dissolve it in glycerol, we ensure that every single cell is surrounded by a thin film of glycerol, and as a result of this, the damage due to freeze thaw is prevented. Hope it is clear to the class.
Yes, ma'am.
So the cells that are prepared in this way are called as competent cells. So but then what is the purpose of calcium chloride and how does it work? So for this I will show you a very nice video which explains the whole mechanism very well. So actually for calcium chloride based method class, there are two views. One of the school of thought believed that calcium chloride, actually calcium activates certain receptors on the surface, calcium binding proteins on the surface, and thereby it helps in the uptake of DNA. But then the second but the second school of thought actually suggests that calcium has a different role. It actually helps in creation of transient pores. So I'll be showing you this. Class, can you see?
Transferring a DNA fragment, or gene, from one organism to another is a key step in learning more about
Class,
how
can
the
you
gene
see
may work.
this?
In 1970, Morton Mandel and Akko Higa discovered a way to make E. coli more competent for transforming foreign DNA. Their calcium chloride method is widely used today to obtain high-efficiency transforming cells.
During rapid growth, cell membrane of E. coli has hundreds of pores, called adhesion holes.
Cell membrane is made up of lipid molecules that have negatively charged phosphates. The negatively charged phosphates on the DNA helix are repelled by those on the lipids. A combination of factors used to make a bacterial cell capable of taking up new DNA. Calcium ions from added calcium chloride can interact with the negative charges, creating an electrostatically neutral situation. Low temperature congeals the lipid membrane, stabilizing the negatively charged phosphates, and making them easier to shield. A rapid rise in the temperature, or heat shock, then creates a temperature imbalance on either side of the bacterial membrane, and sets up a current. With the ionic shield in place, the DNA can then be swept through the adhesion zone.
Class, could you see that?
Yes, ma'am. We can see. We had seen.
And could you hear that?
Yes, ma'am. It was very clear voice. Voice was clear.
Okay, very good. So what we discussed was calcium chloride. People actually demonstrated that calcium along with magnesium also works. For some strains, actually rubidium and lithium chloride are used, but the purpose is actually same. because the charge on the surface of the bacterial cell is negative. The DNA also has negative charge, so the DNA can get actually repelled by the bacterial cell. So then if we add calcium or magnesium chloride, if it is coated with these, then actually it stabilizes, it neutralizes, and therefore this uptake of DNA is possible, because otherwise both have negative charge and the DNA can simply get repelled, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So now the question is how, so once we have preserved, right, once we have preserved the competent cells in -80, then how do we actually do the transformation? So for performing the transformation, and this is for gram-negative bacteria. Telling you in a second about gram-positive bacteria. So for gram-negative bacteria, the method works really well. And once you have prepared these competent cells, then what we do is we take competent cells and then we mix it with the DNA. Now this DNA can be of several types. This can be ligated DNA, this can be linear DNA, this can be supercoiled DNA. Right, so supercoiled DNA, for example, it can be simply plasmid DNA. Ligated DNA, that means you have made a clone, you wanted to make a clone, that means you have made a vector and then this vector is ligated with the insert. So this is called ligated DNA. This is not supercoiled, and that is why I have kept it separate. And the third category is linear DNA, for example, simply a PCR product or just a DNA fragment, right? So we can use any of these three for transformation. So you can mix competent cells with any of these three types of DNA, right? Now what we do is we incubate this again in an ice water mixture for 30 minutes, and then we give a heat shock. Heat shock at 42 degrees Celsius is given for 90 seconds. This is only for 90 seconds. We do not give for more time, because for E. coli or for most of the gram-negative bacteria, the optimal growth temperature is 37 degrees. So if you give heat shock for longer time, the cells will get irreversibly damaged. So we give a transient heat shock, which was shown in the video as well, and due to this transient heat shock, I mean for 90 seconds, these pores are created, and then these are transient pores, and therefore the DNA is taken up during this time. Immediately after this heat shock, we again keep it back in ice cold condition, keep the tube back in ice cold condition for 5 minutes, right? And then what we do is add 1 ml LP to the tube. When we add this 1 ml LP, what we do is we call it as regeneration medium, because the cells which were transient pores were created, so these pores are sealed. Usually this regeneration time, so LP is here used as a regeneration medium, and the regeneration time is usually 1 to 1.5 hours. And during this regeneration time, the cells actually seal their pores. If it is a plasmid, it will get chance to replicate, so you allow at least 2 to 3 doublings. So in LP medium, for example, for E. coli, the doubling time is 20 minutes. So if you allow 2 to 3 doublings, then the cells, then we ensure that the plasmid or the DNA has been taken up by the cell, and the cell has actually grown and divided. So then after this, what we do is we actually, after this 1.5 hours or 1 hour, the cells on a petri plate containing La medium. Let's use selective medium for selecting the plasmids. So in this case, for example, if it is a plasmid, then we have already discussed, for example, for PBr322, you can use tetracycline or ampicillin. For PUC19, you can use ampicillin. For certain others, you can use chloramphenicol. So depending upon that, you can add that antibiotic on the lurea agar medium, and then you spread the cells and then keep it overnight in an incubator. Next morning when you will come, you can see the colonies. So this is how, so ultimately, as you can see that every single cell has taken up one type of plasmid and then it can form colony. Now the question is why the cell cannot take up 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 types of plasmids. Any idea? Any thought processes on this? Why we say that instead of, like Ratnesh was asking, ki we cannot separate genomic DNA fragments by electrophoresis, but then by transforming you can separate individual DNA fragments, because only one ligated product is usually taken up by the cell. So my question is why the cell cannot take up multiple plasmids. Any idea? Anybody? Are you people there or no?
Yes, ma'am, we are here.
Following or not following?
Ma'am,
Transformation.
ma'am, following.
Satyakam, did you follow? Or maybe he has left. Are you people there, class, or nobody is there? Ashiv, Shantan, Paras, Bhavya, Pratham. Okay. Tell me. Any guesses, Deepak? Need to be fast. Just keep.
I think we should take multiple plasmids. Like, I don't see any problem in that.
You are saying that the bacterial cell can take up multiple plasmids?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Ma'am, I think like the holes will be smaller, and if there will be various multiple holes, then that cell will lies. That can happen. Uh,
Okay. Any other guesses?
Degradation of the other plasmids can also occur.
Degradation, no. Why it will degrade, Ashi? If the degradation will happen, it will happen to the first one also. So if you remember, we discussed something which is called as incompatibility. You remember that? Yes, Abulya, I taught you plasmid incompatibility.
yes, ma'am. Yes.
So what happens is that identical plasmids having same origin of replication. So this you need to remember till the next course. I mean till the next few years, that the identical replicons cannot be maintained by a single cell because there will be a competition. So once one plasmid is taken up, it will start replicating and it will not let others in. It will be automatically, it will, even if it will come, it will be removed out, it will be cured. There are other mechanisms also which is called as surface exclusion. So once one type of plasmid has entered, then the other plasmid is excluded from even entry many a times. It's called surface exclusion. But on the other hand, if you are transforming two different types of plasmids class, that means one is having, let's say, P15A origin of replication and the other one is having, let's say, PSC101 origin of replication, then in fact both the plasmids can go inside the cell and they can be replicated because both of them have different origin of replication. Okay, Deepak?
Yes, ma'am.
Followed Deepak or no?
Yes, ma'am, I got it.
Okay. So this was the method that we discussed for gram-negative bacteria very quickly, because I want to finish transformation today. So very quickly I will tell you about gram-positive bacteria. So class, when you are working with gram-positive bacteria, then this simple calcium chloride, magnesium chloride, lithium chloride, rubidium chloride doesn't work. So in such cases, there are multiple methods. First method is you can prepare what is called as protoplast. So protoplast are actually wall-less cells. So what we do is we do some kind of wall treatment. So this wall treatment can include treatment with certain reagents which actually somehow permeabilize and somehow remove the cell wall. So for example, you can use detergents like Triton-X, you can use certain other chemicals like isoniazid, which actually breaks the D-alanine bond between the peptidoglycan layer. So in such cases, you actually prepare a protoplast, which are wall-less cells. But the point is, these protoplasts have a very short life, so they are viable only for a few hours. Few hours means within 1 to 2 hours. Ideally, they will lyse. So you need to incubate the DNA with protoplast only and only during this time. So when you are preparing protoplast, you need to keep observing your cells under microscope, and the moment you see that the cell wall is removed, you immediately add the DNA and then immediately add the regeneration medium, and then you allow the cells to grow. So with gram-positive bacteria, the methods which involve protoplast transformation, they are very tedious, they are very labor-intensive, time-consuming as well. Because all the time you need to keep an eye, and these protoplasts are formed only and only for a small time interval, and after that they will lyse. So in order to overcome this difficulty, a new method was developed which we call it as a physical method of delivery. Electroporation. Electroporation is the method which is
Ma'am,
used in this.
just one question.
Huh.
Ma'am, ma'am, I was actually reading about a fish. In that case, also we do DNA uptake. So in that case, it was written that it takes about 12 to 15 hours. And in that case, so and we are here learning that it just simply it no more than we can give 1 to 2 hours for DNA uptake. So that was
Yes.
the conclusion. Yeah.
Right. So that there is a difference. One thing is you check the type of cell. So the method that we discussed in today's class, calcium chloride, magnesium chloride based method, that is a standard method that is used for E. coli, which was developed by Mendel and Higa. And this is the method that you will be using it for all your routine cloning, and even in your labs you will be using that. But depending upon the type of bacterial strain, the incubation times, the chemicals, the temperature, all of these can vary. Okay, so you will have to check which strain is this. So this method is standard for E. coli, but people have shown, for example, for Acinetobacter it is different, for Helicobacter, for Vibrio, for everything there are different methods. In the
Yes,
cell,
yes, ma'am.
in
That's possible. I was reading about that was about human cells. So
so for sure. So this method class that we discussed is a standard transformation method for E. coli. But depending upon the type of cell, the method could be, it could require more time, it could require different chemicals. For humans, there is a different method. I'll be telling you in a second. So where were we? So we were discussing electroporation, and for electroporation, the equipment that is used is called electroporator or gene pulsar. So this is how the electroporator looks like. So it is there actually in my lab. It is not there in UG lab. So when you people will come, I can show you. So this the only, I think there are two companies, but Biorad is the oldest manufacturer of this equipment, which is called electroporator. It has you can actually control voltage, you can control resistance, you can do the setting of capacitance, and it has a mouse which is connected to this, and onto this mouse you can place your cuvette. So let us see how electroporator works and how we can prepare cells for electroporation. So the cells which are prepared for electroporation are called as electrocompetent cells. Electrocompetent cells are prepared by a very simple method, and class this method works for both gram negative and gram positive bacteria. So it even works for E. coli, it works for Corynebacteria, bacteria, Rhodococcus, for everything. So again the rest of the steps are same, that you start with single colony. I will not write all the steps. You start with single colony, grow it till mid-log phase, you remember that, and then and then you centrifuge at 4000 rpm. So these all steps would remain same. rpm for 10 minutes at 4 degrees Celsius, right? But in this step, you are not going to use calcium chloride. You are going to just wash the cells with 10% glycerol. Again, centrifuge, same 4000 rpm. 10 minutes at 4 degrees Celsius. Again, wash it with glycerol. In this step, you actually repeat at least 2 to 3 times. No calcium chloride, nothing. You keep washing it with glycerol, and finally preserve it in glycerol. Usually when we preserve the competent cells in glycerol, we usually preserve it in 1/10 or 1,000th volume. So even for chemical competent cells, if it is 100 ml starting culture, you got this point or no?
Ma'am, your voice was a little we couldn't hear you.
So which part was not clear?
After
No, we need to hear it till preserve it in glycerol.
Okay, so you preserve it in glycerol, and the point I was trying to tell you is that if the starting culture, so for example, even in case of chemically competent cells, if we started with 100 ml LB, you remember that, or for electrocompetent cells, we started with 100 ml LB, then at the time of final resuspension, the volume should be only 1 ml glycerol. This was the point I was trying to say. So you concentrate the cells. So is this clear or no?
ma'am, clear it. This is clear.
Okay. So you concentrate the cells. So the question is why we do not use calcium chloride in this step. So we do not use calcium chloride when we are preparing electrocompetent cells, because calcium chloride is a salt, right? So when we use calcium chloride in electroporator, it will actually because of this salt there will be a big sparking, and all the cells will burst, and all will die. So we have to use glycerol, and you need to ensure that there should not be any traces of any type of salt, and that is why you need to keep washing with glycerol, so that any traces of salt coming from LB media or any other component should be removed. Now let us see the settings. So when we talk about the settings of the electroporator, we need to set, I think I have written here on so here what we do is we set capacitance, and that is set at 25 microfarad. This is mu microfarad. Resistance is usually set at around 200 ohms, and voltage is usually set at 2.5 kilovolts. So this is the standard parameter for E. coli. But for certain other strains, you need to vary. For example, for Gordonia, it is 600 ohms. For Rhodococcus also, it is 600 ohms. Voltage also varies. For some strains, it is 1.5 kilovolts. For others, it is 2 kilovolts. So all of these can be optimized. So the point is, the way it is done is, once you have prepared the electrocompetent cells, right? So you take then you mix it with DNA. Again, as I told you, the DNA can be supercoiled DNA, linear DNA, or any other type of DNA, ligated DNA. And then, so here again, class, you need to remember, when it is ligated DNA, so ligated DNA will have T4 DNA ligase. And when we are performing ligation, I told you we need to add ligase buffer. So you need to ensure that there is no, if it is ligated DNA, it should be purified. You cannot directly use ligated DNA again because it will have salts coming from the buffer. So you need to purify. You can purify by dialysis, you can purify by phenol chloroform treatment, or you can simply precipitate it and wash a couple of times by 70% ethanol to remove the salts. And then once you mix the electrocompetent cells with DNA, then you actually turn the settings on, which is capacitance set at 25 microfarad, resistance, and all of these settings can be displayed here on the display that you see over here. So you can do all these settings, and ultimately what will happen is you give a pulse, and that is why the machine is also called as gene pulsar. So what you do is you give a pulse and then you record the time in seconds. So usually it is 4.9 to 5 seconds, 4.9 or 5 seconds, and then what you will see is that during this time, as you see here, this is the intact bilayer, but when we give an electric pulse, then actually these pores are created and therefore the DNA can be taken up. Okay, so once the DNA is taken up, again you add the regeneration medium, which is LB. So you add 1 ml LB medium. Allow the cells to grow for about an hour or more. Again, this is to seal these pores and then to make the cells back to normal and healthy. And finally, after 1.5 hours, you actually spread them on the selective media plate, incubate overnight, and then next morning you can see the colonies. Okay, so hope transformation is clear to the class.
Yes,
Artificial,
ma'am.
natural both. So likewise, just to tell you, I will not be going into the details, but just to tell you the way I discussed electroporation, which is perforating cell membrane by electric field, which is done by pulse generator. So this is called electroporation, but likewise there are three other methods which are called as magnetoporation, sonoporation, and optoporation. So in magnetoporation, perforating cell membrane by a magnetic field. Sonoporation, as the name itself says, ultrasound is used. Optoporation is by laser pulse, and the material that is used is for magnetoporation, magnetic field; for sonoporation, ultrasound probe; and for optoporation, we use a laser microscope. So these are all used for uh, uptake of DNA. Okay, but
Ma'am, lasers didn't harm DNA.
no. So the point is which type of laser and for how many seconds we are using. So laser can harm the cells. Laser can harm, for example, the protein, but laser, I mean the kind of conditions that are used, it will not. So, but for bacterial cells class, we usually go for electroporation or chemically competent cells. Okay, so that finishes the gene transfer first method, which is transformation. The next method is conjugation, and I believe that Shilpi ma'am has taught you conjugation in great detail.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
yes, tell me.
Yes, ma'am.